Welcome to the Front Street Animal Shelter, located in the heart of downtown Sacramento, California. Every year, over 11,000 animals come through these doors. Dedicated staff and volunteers work hard to provide quality care to these animals. Each and every one has a unique story to tell, and there's always so much to learn. We'd like to explore and share some of the real-life experiences of both the animals and the humans that can be found here in A Shelter Life. Hi, and welcome to Shelter Life. I'm Don Hinkle, and I'll be your host for tonight's episode. This evening, we've got the Public Relations Coordinator for Front Street, Mr. Bobby Mann. So, Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You know, Public Relations at Front Street has done numerous things in the past couple of years. But before we get into that, how did you land this great opportunity at Front Street?
Well, it's actually a pretty interesting story. Growing up, I was actually never into animal welfare. I had a dog growing up. I'm East Indian, so we had a German Shepherd that lived in the backyard, male intact dog. We always took our dog to the vet because one of our uncles is always a vet, so they're always vaccinated. But essentially, that was my idea of animal welfare. When I was about 20 years old, I was actually going to school for fashion design. And I was going across the street to purchase a sandwich, and I saw a gentleman with a dog in a box. It gauged my interest, so I said, "Hey, what are you doing with that dog?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to sell this dog, and if I can't sell it, I'm just going to dump it." And I said, that's not a very nice thing to do, so I will buy your dog. And he said, "Well, give me $100. And I said, "I'll give you 60. And he sold me a pit bull puppy. And so I took this dog home, and I said the first thing I should probably do is take it to a vet. I took it to a vet, and the vet saw the dog, gave him a little slap on the butt, one vaccine, and I walked out with a $90 vet bill. And I said, "Whoa, what did I just walk into?" After that, I did a little more research, and I found out about low-cost spay and neuter services at a local shelter. And when I went there, I said, maybe I should try volunteering a bit to see what's really going on in my community. Filled out an application. That application ended up being a work application. They called me in for an interview. I show up after a fashion show, very dapper, very not part of the industry. And they put me in a room and they say, fill out this quiz and tell us everything that you know about animals. Use whatever resources you have. So I said, okay. They shut the door. They said, use whatever resources you have. I pull out the new iPhone that I just got. I Googled every answer and I got 100% on the quiz. They said, wow, you know about feline leukemia? You can name 10 breeds of dogs. I'm like, yeah, feline leukemia, that stuff's horrible. You don't want that. And somehow or another, I ended up getting a gig at a local shelter. And I said, hey, why not? Let's give it a try. I thought it was going to be all fun and games until I realized the real epidemic going on in our community, right? That we were not saving all the animals that I assumed that we were. And there was a hardship going on, and we needed to do something about it. And so that's when I really got into animal welfare. At that point, I knew that education was important to me because it's not just about saving one dog at a time. Every shelter should have a short-term and a long-term business plan. Short-term should be to save the dogs that are there that day and cats. Long-term should be to educate the public about how to save the future animals. And so I left that shelter to pursue humane education, and I started working in local schools doing literacy programs with kids. Okay. So I would take shelter dogs or therapy dogs to schools and have children read books aloud to the dogs. And it was not only for literacy and fluency, but also social and emotional development. At that time, while I was doing all of those things, I somehow or another ran into Gina when I went to go do some shelter photography volunteering at Front Street. And after that, it's just been up and up and up.
So you mentioned Gina. Gina was on our first episode. And one of the things we talked about was Facebook. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that the presence on Facebook is driven a lot, if not mostly, by you.
It is a team effort.
I understand that.
And if it wasn't for Gina working, I don't know, there's 24 hours in a day, so about 28 hours a day.
Right.
I don't know how she does it. We would not have grown the way that we have, but she was able to see something in me with my marketing skills, which was typically my background, and we just ran with it. And so, yeah, it's been very exciting. We were able to grow at that time when I helped take over. We were at about 3,000 followers, I believe. To date, we're at about 57,000 followers. And our analytics show that we are having a following of anywhere from 750,000 to 2.4 million people reach weekly right now.
So what do you think really drives that? Because, I mean, the posts are very engaging, but what is that added extra that you and Gina are putting into that Facebook post that it really grabs those people in?
I think that we were really lucky Reason being, when we started this Facebook page, the shelter was not yet really branded as Front Street. It was something that we were trying to accomplish, and we were not a shelter that was considered successful at that point. Transparency to me is key, because this new generation, we're not the have our blinders on, let me cut you a check, I don't want to see what's going on, I'm going to assume the best. We really want to roll our sleeves up and get our hands dirty and make a difference. But until we know what's really going on, we're not going to be able to really put ourselves in that situation. So when we started, we probably had about a 30 or 40% save rate at the time. And Gina was the first to say, hey, you know what, we're not a good shelter. But without the help of our community, without us working harder and giving up all the excuses, we are not going to be successful. And so when we started this page, we were making strides, but the community was able to grow with us.
Right.
And with that, they have seen the journey of Front Street. So even now to this date, although we are able to sustain the high save rate that we've had, there are times where we are unable to be successful in what we're trying to accomplish. But because of the transparency and the journey that these followers have shared with us, we do establish empathy with them. And they understand, because our goal is to save them all, but it is, of course, progress, not perfection. We are not perfect, our animals are not perfect, our community is not perfect. But as we've grown together through our social media platform, it's really created a culture for change. And so that's what I think has been most successful for us, because it wasn't that all of a sudden we were this amazing shelter and overnight people are like, oh yeah, they've always been great. We still have room to grow, but people have also seen where we've come from. So
right.
That's helped a lot.
So not only, I mean, Instagram is out there as well, right? Twitter is out there as well. Obviously, the biggest platform is Facebook. Is that Front Street's #1 marketing tool?
Yeah, reason why, because we're broke. We have no marketing budget and social media is free.
Right.
When we started, I'm actually not a city employee for the city of Sacramento. I am a contract employee. Gina was very kind to see that I had a skill set that could be utilized by the shelter, but also was able to give me a small contract to be able to do this for a living, which I'm very honored to be able to do. When we started, she said, hey, you know, put up a couple pictures. Originally, my goal was to build a blog for the shelter. That's what Gina wanted. But as we transitioned, and we had a photographer working for us at the time, Ann Williams, who was phenomenal. She was basically the one that started this culture of shelter photography, which I believe we'll get into a little later on. And when she left, Gina kind of put this in my lap, said, hey, I need help with this, put everything else on the back burner. She saw the promise in social media, and maybe not even to the extent that I did. I just said, oh, cool, it's a Facebook page. Everybody has a Facebook page. But when we really put our minds to it, it grew into this amazing thing.
So one of the things with the Facebook page is you guys will always reply. So if somebody actually poses a question on the Facebook page, I'm assuming those replies are either you or Gina, right?
I am getting exhausted just thinking about that.
Yeah.
So content always has to be quality, but engagement is king. People don't want to talk to a wall. A lot of these large corporate organizations that you see that have millions of followers that have been typically purchased through marketing tools will be posting and asking questions. And a lot of times they're unresponded to. Where with us, with our community, when people have a question, we try to be receptive within a couple hours. Gina and I are at it 24/7. We're either on our phone, we're on our computer, calling each other. You know, you go to bed at 10, finishing your emails, you wake up for a glass of water at 2. Part of that curriculum is check the messages to see if anybody has a question. So it's kind of just ingrained in us at this point. I would say that it is not healthy as far as the work-life balance,
right,
but you got to give a little to get a little, right?
You do. We kind of inadvertently did not introduce the other guest that we have real quickly. Bobby, who do you have with you?
This is Louie, or his full name, Lou Bear. He is the Chief Canine Officer of the Front Street Animal Shelter.
Mascot.
He actually has a better title than I do. And he is pretty much the coolest dog in the history of dogs.
Right. And he's from Front Street, isn't he?
He is a Front Street alum. He actually has a pretty cool story himself. One of the cool things that we do at our shelter is we are blessed to have a clothing collection. And we were doing a media segment on a Saturday morning. I get to do a lot of the feel-good media for the shelter, and of course this was a feel-good piece. The story was about local boutiques carrying our collection to help raise awareness and proceeds for the shelter. So my friends at a local station called me and said, hey Bob, tomorrow morning, remember we have to go to the local boutique. Totally lost it. Did not remember that we had this going on. It's about 8 o'clock on a Friday evening. I'm planning on going out with my friends to enjoy myself. And I said, oh crud, I need to find a dog to take on TV tomorrow. So I walk through the shelter, and of course, I'm a pit bull guy. I have a pit bull as well, but it's not your typical boutique-y sort of dog.
Right.
And so I walk through the shelter, and I find nothing. There are no little fluffy white things in the shelter. And then I go into one of our veterinary exam rooms where Dr. Warner typically houses a lot of her sick or injured animals so she can see them throughout the day.
Right.
And I'm like, this is a last resort. Let's see what's going on in here. So I walk in and I see this white fluff with the sign that says, be careful, hit by car, possible broken leg, on all sorts of medication. And I said, perfect, this dog's on Medicam, he's doped up, he's just gonna be laying in my arms, this is gonna be perfect. So I spun the story because the proceeds go to help shelter animals that need that sort of medical care. So I was gonna take this dog, I was gonna talk about how it's not available for adoption, but proceeds from these shirts help benefit dogs who have broken legs, that need medical attention. So I took him on air, and I said 3 times, this dog is not available for adoption, this dog is not available for adoption, this dog is not available for adoption. As we're taping the segment, the boutique's phone is ringing in the back because people are not only calling the shelter, they're calling the boutique wanting to adopt this dog. Before I even get back to the shelter, Gina Knepp says, do not bring that dog back until it's available for adoption because there are people waiting outside for that dog.
Wow.
And I don't want to deal with that issue that you created for me. And so I said, okay, cool, I'll foster the dog. And 2 weeks passed, 3 weeks passed, and the typical rule, 3-week period, a dog really comes out of their box. 3 months, you really know what dog that is. So I said, I'm going to give him 3 weeks because if he really is this chill, I'm going to keep him. And 3 months later, this is what he does.
And he's definitely made a presence, that's for sure. He's kind of like the photo star, too, on a lot of Facebook posts, too.
Yeah, it saves me from having to make a trip down to the shelter because I just throw him outside my house and snap a quick shot and get it up.
So you mentioned something that we definitely want to talk about, and that is the incredible photography work that's done by Robin Hagee and Hope Harris, and you as well. But a lot of those are on Facebook. How did that collaboration really begin with those people? And did they jump in wholeheartedly to get, the photography is incredible with these animals. How did that come to be?
Well, number one, Gina saw this really early on, that in order to really change the shelter perception, you have to have very quality visuals. Dogs have to be happy and excited. You can't be taking pictures of dogs through the kennels. When you have these really sad ads or sad pictures, people may want to donate a few bucks to you, but they're not going to want to adopt your shelter animals. And that is our number one premise, is saving lives, not just making donation dollars.
Right.
So originally when I got there, we did have a contract photographer, Ann Williams, that was taking dog portraits. And to me, it was mind-blowing. I had never seen this. I thought it was a great marketing tactic. And then at that point, she was offered another job and she left the shelter, which was, it was a tough time for us. So I was able to fill in for a little bit, but of course, doing the other 50 things that we do, it was falling through the cracks. At that time, Hope Harris started donating her time doing cat photography. So she was actually a volunteer donating all of her time.
Right.
She would come every Tuesday and dress them up in boas and beads and all of this wonderful stuff, which helped us definitely increase our save rate for cats. And at that time, we found Robin Hagee, who was a local dog photographer that was donating time around with rescues. And we were able to offer a very, very small contract in order to come in. And she has really just changed the game with dog shelter photography.
Well, I think, they both do an incredible job. But I think what really captures it, and people who follow Facebook, they can see some of the behind the scenes of these photo sessions. Her heart and their heart is so into this. Just the comments that Robin makes about she always finds a dog, and then she's got a really good partner who helps her. I think that's Anna Cranberry, right?
She is amazing.
Right. And I remember her from the Nutcracker. But it sounds like they just have a ball doing this. They have a really good time. And the animals, the pictures just look so great. I don't know how they can get these animals to pose and get the natural look, but I guess it's not as easy as it appears, right?
Well, a lot of it is energy. Dogs, if you're fearful and stressed and you're angry, that is going to be projected onto animals. And these are two of the most kind-hearted, joyful women I have ever met. Sometimes what's hard for me, because Robin is an artist, she's amazing at what she does. And sometimes we're on a time crunch and I'm like, Robin, I really need to get this picture as soon as possible. She's like, no problem. We're just going to cuddle for about 40 minutes and have a good time and I'll get this to you. Which, everybody is their own person and I love her for it. And there's no way I could accomplish what she does. But it really is. It's a lot of it's energy, and people see 15 adoptable pictures go on, but they have no idea that Robin and Anna are there for 6-7 hours getting those 15 shots because they're doing 50 to 100 shots per dog. While they're paying.
And do they come up with all these ideas? The crazy costumes and all that. Is that just spontaneous?
They're just having fun, you know. A lot of it's seasonal, a lot of it's what's in their head. Sometimes I ask them, hey, we have a current event coming up with a baseball team or a basketball team.
Right.
Can you throw this stuff in? Which they happily do.
Right.
But a lot of that is just their creativity, so it's just remarkable.
All that incorporates into the whole Facebook persona and the image of Front Street, right?
Absolutely.
All
Life
of
is
it
good
does.
on Front Street.
So we've got a little kind of video photo collage of some of the things that Bobby has put together via Facebook and other things that he's done throughout the community. So we're going to take a look at that, and then we'll be right back. So let's have a look. Incredible photos. Obviously, you enjoy doing your job, right? It's kind of obvious to see that. But what part, there has to come a point in time when some of these stories really tug at the heart. So we've seen some great stories on Facebook, like Hope. That one comes to mind. Some of the other ones that come to mind are the dog that had that collar embedded. You do a really delicate job of conveying the sad stories as well. Do you pull that from somewhere special? Because it comes across as so sincere and so honest, whereas it could be just really coarse and kind of hard to look at, but it never comes across that way. Where do you pull that from?
Well, a lot of that really comes from my early career in animal welfare. I've pretty much been doing this my whole adult life. I'm blessed because, yes, I get to do the media aspect of it and the public relations, but I really started at the front lines. My original job at a shelter was to do animal intake or receiving. So my job was I had to try to convince people not to leave their pets at the shelter.
Right.
And I'm a people person, and I was good at my job, but my idea of success was keeping 1 out of the 50 animals that were coming in that day out of the shelter. So I did suffer from compassion fatigue. There were times, I remember vividly a story where it was the end of the day, it was around 6 o'clock, and a family's coming into the shelter to relinquish their personal pet. It's a 6-year-old lab. It's a husband and wife and 2 girls. 1 girl is 6 and 1 girl is 10. They come into the shelter sobbing. They're the only ones left for the day. And I'm exhausted. We've taken in 45 animals. And I just said, please just take your dog home. I cannot do this right now. Dad walks up and says, look, we have to leave our dog. We've had this dog its whole life. We're traveling a lot. The kids are in too many sports. It's just not a good fit for us. And I had to pause. And customer service is key, but you also want to have transparency. And I really wanted to say, what are you doing? And it's not the fact that he's relinquishing his animal, because the reality is you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But what hurt me the most is that those 2 girls were sitting in that office sobbing, holding on to that dog's leash, telling me, sir, please don't take my dog.
Oh, yeah.
And after the dad filled out the paperwork, he looked over at his daughters and he said, don't worry, we'll get a new dog next year. And moments like that can absolutely destroy a person that does this for a living. Because what are we teaching our kids? That animals are disposable?
Right.
And then the dad walks for the door and he's trying to walk out, and the girls are sobbing, holding onto the leash. And he looks at them like they're doing something wrong, frustrated, looking at his watch. So I walk over to those girls and I sit on the ground and I introduce myself. I said, hi, my name is Bobby. And they wiped their tears and introduced themselves. And I said, can I tell you what's going to happen with your dog? And they finally stopped crying and said yes. So I said, I'm going to take him for a walk. I'm going to kennel him up and give him a warm blanket and a toy. I promise to walk him every day, and I will personally make sure that your dog finds a good home. And finally, after 10 minutes, they handed me the leash and they said, thank you, please take care of my dog.
Right.
And
so that experience, you pull on that a lot, don't you?
Well, it was devastating.
Yeah.
You know, I suffered from compassion fatigue for a very long time, to a point where I was one of the people that had to euthanize animals and hold animals on their last day, and it made me emotionally numb. But that was something that really triggered. I had to walk outside, and I sat on the curb and I cried, because I wasn't crying for that dog. I wasn't just crying for those kids. I was really crying for my community.
Right.
Because that's just one story. I don't even know what else is going on.
And the story is that some people do consider their animals disposable, right? And being in public relations, obviously Front Street is very out there with the public in Sacramento. We are physically being seen in Sacramento. And I know that one of the goals is public education and outreach. And just by you sharing that story, it tells us there's still a lot more public education and outreach that needs to occur, so that people understand that when you take Lou's with you.
Right.
He's there for the long term.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not a disposable pet,
Right.
so to speak. So I think there's a lot of that still needs to happen. And maybe that's part of what you're going to be doing in the future for Front Street, right?
That would be a goal. On the other end of it, though, you know, we as a shelter, we are not about bashing the community. We know that most people are good people. Per capita, our jurisdiction, the city of Sacramento, has over 250,000 owned pets. And we see about 10,000 of them,
Right.
which is such a small percentage. To us, yeah, it's exhausting because we see every single one of the animals that are relinquished to a shelter. But really, you know, it's less than a couple percent. So most people are good people. So the goal is not to say, hey, we have to teach everybody that animals are amazing. Most people know. It's just about shifting that culture, that
Right.
mindset, that these dogs are not secondhand throwaway dogs, because in most situations, they're not there because of any hardship of their own. It's
Right.
because of the owners.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Lou,
Right.
right? Look at this is an ambassador dog.
Oh, yeah. So you talked about something a little bit earlier, and I definitely want to touch on it before we wrap up, and that's the brand known as Front Street.
Team Front Street, right?
This is, It's the S with the dog and the cat, right? I mean, it's there, and that's the brand. And how do you think that has evolved?
It has been insane. I don't know. I can't really pinpoint the total trajectory of it, but I can tell you the day that I realized that it was successful. So we are the city municipal shelter. We are animal control, or
Right.
the pound, which, you know what? I'm not scared to say that word anymore. People would be like, don't use that. That's such a negative statement. The word pound means that you impound animals, and that's what we do. And I'm empowering the pound. I'm taking the word back. That's what we are doing, because there's nothing wrong with it. It's setting that precedence and showing people how successful these shelters can be.
Right.
With Team Front Street, with our social media following, of course, we're branded as the Front Street Animal Shelter. We have had people who messaged us and said, "Dear Front Street, I found a dog in the city of Sacramento, and I don't want to take it to animal control because they're going to kill it. Can I please bring it to Front Street?" Success.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
one and the same. So
Yeah, and then when we say, "Well, hey, you're more than welcome to bring it here, but actually we are animal control," they're like,
that's so funny.
and that's the shift in culture.
It is. It is. And I think the city really has embraced Front Street too, with all of the public outings that Front Street is in. I mean, you really can't go to a major city function without seeing or at least hearing about Front Street, which is phenomenal. And I think one of the things that you've kind of pioneered, and just real briefly, can you talk about Camp Front Street?
Sure.
And exactly what that is.
Absolutely.
Real briefly.
So, going back into the education, so my background was humane education for a while. I was going into schools and talking to kids about animals, and I never lost that passion. And I still knew that was a long-term goal. Is short-term plan is keep animals out, long-term plan, educate the future pet owners. So Camp Front Street was something that we designed to really bring education awareness to kids, but also to kind of enlighten them and show them the fun side of animal shelters, because a lot of them have never been to one, and a lot of them have parents who are still fearful of what we used to be. So we invented Camp Front Street, which is a one-day camp for kids from ages 7 to 12, where they come in, they can do a shelter tour. We teach them about the importance of spaying and neutering. We teach them about pet behavior. We teach them about dog body language, because these are things that they can take firsthand into the community. By teaching them how to properly approach an animal or signs of a fearful animal, you're going to reduce dog bites in your community.
Right.
And by teaching them the importance of spaying and neutering, they're going to be much more receptive to having a spayed or neutered animal. So with all of this, we were able to have great guests like Anjali World, which is a hip hop artist who has a heart of gold that donates her time to come work at our camps. We're doing puppet shows, we're doing arts and crafts, and it really just leaves kids with a great feeling about animals.
We would love to film that sometime.
Yeah,
For sure.
Next
For
one.
sure.
Sorry, we're getting a little behind with the 8,000 things that
I
we're
know.
doing, but we're going to be back on the map this summer.
Multitasking. So, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We probably need to do a part 2 eventually, because there's so much more to still talk about.
We're ready.
He's like so wiped out. So, I want to thank Bobby Mann, obviously, PR coordinator extraordinaire for Front Street. And I want to thank the crew here at Access Sacramento who helps us put on the show for you guys so that you can see a highly production show about Front Street. Thank you to the volunteers at Front Street, the people who shovel the poo and wash the dishes and do the laundry, all the things that we need to have done at Front Street to make it a vital working organization. And until next time, my name's Don Hinkle, and we will see you right here on Shelter Life. Have a good night.
Hello, I'm Gina, and I manage the Front Street Animal Shelter for the City of Sacramento. Our staff and volunteers are incredibly proud of the work we do for the lost, stray, abandoned, neglected, and surrendered animals that come into our care. And we've made great strides on Front Street, but we also realize that there is still more work to be done. With the help and support of people just like you, we know we will ultimately achieve our goal, which is saving more lives.